A warning from the shadows. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the crowded city streets. Amid the evening bustle, a young girl named Mia stood quietly on the sidewalk. Her tattered clothes and dirt-smeared face blended into the urban chaos, making her nearly invisible to the hurried passers-by. In her hand, she held a small cardboard sign that read, "Hungry. Anything helps." Yet, as much as she tried to seem inconspicuous, her large, wary eyes betrayed her youth and vulnerability. Mia had been on the streets for as long as she could remember. Her memories of a home, a family, or a place to belong were faint, like a dream she couldn't quite recall. The city was her world now, its harsh edges and unforgiving rhythms shaping her days. She had learned to survive by being resourceful and staying out of sight, but tonight, something felt different. As she moved from her usual spot near the subway entrance, her stomach growled in protest. The ache was constant, a dull reminder of her hunger. She scanned the faces of the crowd, searching for anyone who might spare some change or a kind word. That's when she saw him. A man stepped out of a sleek black car parked across the street. He was tall, his tailored suit fitting him perfectly, exuding an air of authority and confidence. His sharp features and purposeful stride made him stand out from the sea of weary commuters. Mia's gaze lingered on him, not out of hope for help, but because he seemed so utterly untouchable, like a figure from a different world. Just as Mia turned to move on, she noticed something odd. A woman, dressed in a chic coat and heels, was watching the man intently. There was something about her posture, the way she hovered near him without making her presence known, that sent a chill down Mia's spine. Her instincts, honed from years of surviving on the streets, screamed that something was wrong. Mia's first impulse was to ignore it. She had her own problems to worry about. But as she watched the woman slip a small vial from her pocket and carefully pour its contents into a take-out coffee cup, her heart began to race. The man turned and smiled at the woman as she handed him the cup. Their exchange was brief, but Mia could see the tension in the woman's face. She was trying too hard to appear casual. Mia's instincts screamed louder now, this wasn't an innocent gesture. Something dangerous was unfolding before her eyes. Mia stepped forward hesitantly, her heart pounding. She knew she should walk away, but she couldn't. Her conscience wouldn't let her. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the crowd until she was only a few feet away from the man. He was about to take a sip of the coffee when Mia shouted, "Don't drink that." The crowd around them froze. The man looked up, startled, his hand pausing midair. The woman beside him turned sharply, her eyes narrowing as she glared at Mia. "Who are you?" The woman demanded, her voice laced with irritation. Mia's voice trembled, but she stood her ground. "Please, sir, don't drink it. She put something in it. I saw her." The man's expression shifted from confusion to suspicion as he looked at the woman. "Is this true?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. The woman's face flushed, and she stammered, I don't know what she's talking about. She's just a street kid. Probably wants attention." Mia's hands clenched into fists. "I'm not lying," she said, her voice growing steadier. "I saw you put something in his drink." The man studied Mia, then the woman. He didn't drink from the cup. Instead, he handed it to a security guard who had stepped forward, asking him to have it tested. "Let's see if there's any truth to this," he said evenly, his piercing eyes fixed on the woman. The tension in the air was palpable. Onlookers whispered among themselves, their curiosity piqued by the unfolding drama. The woman's composure began to crack as the moment stretched on. Finally, she turned on her heel and fled, pushing her way through the crowd. Mia let out a shaky breath, her knees threatening to give way. The man approached her, his expression unreadable. "Why did you speak up?" he asked, his voice low but kind. Mia looked down, her face flushing with a mix of fear and determination. "Because it was the right thing to do," she said softly. Even if nobody else believed me. The man nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. What's your name? Mia, she replied, her voice barely audible. Mia, you may have just saved my life, he said. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a sleek business card and handed it to her. If you ever need help, call this number. My name is Alexander Kane. Mia took the card with trembling fingers, unsure of what to say. Before she could find the words, Alexander turned and disappeared into the crowd, his security detail following close behind. As the crowd dispersed, Mia stood alone, clutching the card tightly. Her heart was still racing, but beneath the adrenaline, she felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, hope. For the first time in years, she had the sense that maybe, just maybe, her life could change. That night, as she curled up under the bridge where she slept, Mia replayed the events in her mind. Who was Alexander Kane? And why had the woman tried to harm him? Questions swirled in her head, but one thing was certain, her life had taken an unexpected turn. And she wasn't sure if it was for better or worse. The ripple of kindness. Mia woke up the next morning to the sound of the city stirring. The rumble of buses, the honking of cars, and the chatter of early risers blended into the symphony of urban life. She stretched under the bridge where she'd spent the night, her body stiff from the cold concrete. The small business card Alexander Kane had given her was clutched tightly in her hand. For the first time in a long while, she felt a faint glimmer of hope, a fragile thread pulling her toward something unknown but promising. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since the morning before. She eyed the card again, debating whether to use it. What if he doesn't mean it? What if he's forgotten about me already, she whispered to herself. But deep down, she knew she had no other options. With a deep breath, she stood and brushed the dirt off her clothes. The phone booth nearby was old and battered, its glass panes cracked and graffiti-covered. Mia dropped the few coins she had into the slot, dialing the number printed on the sleek card. Her fingers trembled as she held the receiver to her ear. Good morning. Alexander Kane's office. How can I assist you? A polished voice answered after the first ring. Mia hesitated, her voice barely audible. I. Alexander Kane gave me this card. He said I could call if I needed help. There was a brief pause before the receptionist's tone softened. Yes, of course. Can you tell me your name, miss? It's Mia, she replied nervously. One moment, Mia. Let me transfer you. The line clicked, and soft music played in her ear. Mia's heart pounded as she waited. Moments later, a familiar voice greeted her. Mia. This is Alexander Kane, he said warmly. I'm glad you called. Are you safe? Mia's throat tightened. She hadn't expected him to remember her. Yes, I'm safe. But I don't know what to do. I've been on the streets for so long. I need help. Alexander's voice was calm and reassuring. Stay where you are, Mia. I'll send someone to pick you up. Can you tell me your location? She glanced around, describing the intersection near the bridge. Thank you, she murmured, her voice cracking with emotion. No need to thank me, Alexander replied. You showed incredible courage yesterday. Now it's my turn to help you. Within 20 minutes, a black car pulled up to the curb. The driver, a kind-looking older man in a suit, stepped out and approached Mia. You must be Mia, he said with a smile. My name is Henry. Mr. Kane sent me to bring you to his office. Mia hesitated for a moment before nodding and climbing into the car. The interior was unlike anything she'd ever seen. The leather seats were pristine, and the faint scent of cedar filled the air. She sank into the plush seat, feeling out of place but grateful. As the car weaved through the city, Mia gazed out the window, watching the familiar streets blur past. When they reached a towering glass building in the heart of downtown, Henry parked and escorted her inside. The lobby was vast and luxurious, its marble floors gleaming under the bright lights. Mia felt small and out of place among the well-dressed professionals bustling about. Henry led her to a private elevator, which whisked them to the top floor. When the doors opened, Mia stepped into a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. Alexander Kane stood by his desk, his expression warm and welcoming. "Mia," he greeted, stepping forward. "I'm glad you're here. Come, sit down." She hesitated before taking a seat in one of the plush chairs across from him. "Thank you for helping me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander sat down, folding his hands on the desk. "You don't have to thank me, Mia. Yesterday, you saved my life. The least I can do is offer you a chance to turn yours around. Tell me about yourself. How did you end up on the streets?" Mia's gaze dropped to her lap as she recounted her story. She spoke of losing her parents at a young age, bouncing between foster homes, and eventually running away when the system failed her. She described the loneliness, the hunger, and the constant fight to survive. By the time she finished, tears were streaming down her face. She wiped her tears, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I didn't feel brave. I couldn't let something bad happen when I could stop it." Alexander nodded. "That's what makes you different. And it's why I want to help you. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Mia hesitated before nodding. "I think so." "Good," Alexander said, standing up. "First things first, we need to get you a safe place to stay. There's a shelter I support that offers more than just a bed. They provide counseling, education, and job training. I'll arrange for you to stay there." Mia's eyes widened. "Really? I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Alexander replied with a smile. "Just promise me you'll give it your best shot." Later that afternoon, Mia found herself at the shelter. The staff welcomed her warmly, showing her to a clean, cozy room. For the first time in years, she had a bed to sleep in, a door she could close, and a sense of security she'd almost forgotten existed. Over the next few days, Mia began to settle into her new life. She attended counseling sessions that helped her process her trauma and started taking classes to earn her GED. She even made a few friends among the other residents, who shared their own stories of hardship and survival. Despite the progress she was making, Mia couldn't shake the nagging feeling that her encounter with Alexander and the mysterious woman was unfinished. She wondered what had happened to the woman and why she tried to harm Alexander. Part of her wanted to forget about it and focus on rebuilding her life, but another part felt compelled to uncover the truth. One evening, as she sat in the common area of the shelter, she overheard a news report on the television. The anchor's voice caught her attention. "In a shocking turn of events, authorities have arrested a prominent socialite on charges of attempted poisoning. Sources say the intended victim, billionaire Alexander Kane, narrowly avoided harm thanks to an anonymous tip." Mia's breath caught in her throat as the screen displayed a photo of the woman she'd seen that day. The anchor continued, "Investigators believe the motive may be linked to a bitter business rivalry. More details to follow." Mia's heart raced. She'd been the anonymous tip, and her actions had set these events in motion. She couldn't help but wonder what would happen next and how her connection to Alexander Kane might continue to shape her future. For the first time, Mia felt the faint stirrings of something she hadn't experienced in years: purpose. And she knew her journey was only just beginning. Secrets unveiled. Days turned into weeks as Mia adjusted to life at the shelter. It was a strange, bittersweet transition. The rhythm of structured days, shared meals, and a roof over her head was comforting but also disorienting after years of living on edge. She often found herself staring at the business card Alexander Kane had given her, wondering why a man like him had taken such an interest in her. Despite the progress she was making, the lingering questions about the incident with the woman continued to gnaw at her. Alexander had been kind and supportive, but there was something in his eyes that hinted at a deeper story. Mia's curiosity grew, fueled by a desire to understand why her life had intersected so dramatically with his. One afternoon, while organizing donated clothes in the shelter's storeroom, Mia overheard two staff members talking. "Did you hear about that Kane Industries scandal?" one of them whispered. "Who hasn't?" the other replied. "A poisoning attempt tied to some high-stakes business deal. I heard the woman they arrested was close to Kane, like, really close. Rumor has it she wanted him out of the picture for control over some huge project." Mia's hands froze mid-fold. The snippets of conversation aligned too perfectly with what she'd witnessed. The woman's cold demeanor and Alexander's composed yet wary reaction now made more sense. This wasn't just a random attack, it was personal. That evening, Mia sat in her room, the card in her hand again. She debated calling Alexander, her fingers brushing over the numbers. Finally, she dialed. The now familiar voice of his receptionist answered. "It's Mia," she said, her voice steady. "I need to speak with Mr. Kane." Moments later, Alexander's voice came through. "Mia, how are you?" "I'm okay," she replied. "But I've been hearing things. About the woman who tried to poison you. I need to know the truth." There was a pause before Alexander sighed. "You've been through enough, Mia. You don't need to get involved in this." "But I am involved," Mia insisted. "I saw it happen. I stopped her. Please, I deserve to know." Another silence followed, longer this time. Finally, Alexander said, "Meet me at my office tomorrow. I'll explain everything." Secrets unveiled. Days turned into weeks as Mia adjusted to life at the shelter. It was a strange, bittersweet transition. The rhythm of structured days, shared meals, and a roof over her head was comforting but also disorienting after years of living on edge. She often found herself staring at the business card Alexander Kane had given her, wondering why a man like him had taken such an interest in her. Despite the progress she was making, the lingering questions about the incident with the woman continued to gnaw at her. Alexander had been kind and supportive, but there was something in his eyes that hinted at a deeper story. Mia's curiosity grew, fueled by a desire to understand why her life had intersected so dramatically with his. One afternoon, while organizing donated clothes in the shelter's storeroom, Mia overheard two staff members talking. "Did you hear about that Kane Industries scandal?" one of them whispered. "Who hasn't?" the other replied. "A poisoning attempt tied to some high-stakes business deal. I heard the woman they arrested was close to Kane, like, really close. Rumor has it she wanted him out of the picture for control over some huge project." Mia's hands froze mid-fold. The snippets of conversation aligned too perfectly with what she'd witnessed. The woman's cold demeanor and Alexander's composed yet wary reaction now made more sense. This wasn't just a random attack, it was personal. That evening, Mia sat in her room, the card in her hand again. She debated calling Alexander, her fingers brushing over the numbers. Finally, she dialed. The now familiar voice of his receptionist answered. "It's Mia," she said, her voice steady. "I need to speak with Mr. Kane." Moments later, Alexander's voice came through. "Mia, how are you?" "I'm okay," she replied. "But I've been hearing things. About the woman who tried to poison you. I need to know the truth." There was a pause before Alexander sighed. "You've been through enough, Mia. You don't need to get involved in this." "But I am involved," Mia insisted. "I saw it happen. I stopped her. Please, I deserve to know." Another silence followed, longer this time. Finally, Alexander said, "Meet me at my office tomorrow. I'll explain everything." The next morning, Mia arrived at Kane Industries, her nerves buzzing. Henry greeted her in the lobby and escorted her to Alexander's private conference room. The walls were lined with photographs and awards, showcasing the magnitude of Alexander's achievements. Yet, for all the grandeur, there was an undercurrent of tension in the room. Alexander entered moments later, his usually composed face shadowed by fatigue. He gestured for Mia to sit, then took a seat across from her. "You've earned my trust, Mia," he began. "So, I'll tell you the truth. But it's complicated." He leaned back, his gaze distant. "The woman you saw, her name is Victoria Graves. She was once my business partner and someone I considered a friend. Together, we spearheaded a project that had the potential to revolutionize energy production, a clean, renewable source that could transform industries worldwide. But as the project progressed, her ambition twisted. She wanted control, power, and the wealth that came with it. And she saw me as an obstacle." Mia listened intently, her heart pounding. "The day you saw her," Alexander continued, "she intended to poison me during a public meeting. If she'd succeeded, she'd have gained control over the project and the company. Your warning stopped her." Mia's mind reeled. "But why didn't you say anything earlier? Why keep this a secret?" Alexander sighed. "Because power struggles like these aren't just fought in boardrooms. They have ripple effects. The media, the investors, the people who depend on our work, they'd all suffer if this became public knowledge. I wanted to protect them." "And you?" "Me?" Mia asked, confused. "Yes," Alexander said firmly. "Victoria's arrest has stirred things up. There are people loyal to her who might see you as a threat now. You witnessed too much, Mia." The weight of his words settled over her. For the first time, she realized the danger she might be in. "What do we do?" "For now, I need you to stay cautious. The shelter is safe, but you must remain vigilant. And if you see or hear anything suspicious, tell me immediately." Mia nodded, her resolve hardening. She had survived so much already. If danger was coming, she would face it head-on. The following days were uneventful but tense. Mia returned to her classes and routines, though she remained on high alert. One evening, as she walked back to the shelter after a study session, she noticed a black car parked a little too close to the entrance. Its windows were tinted, and the engine idled quietly. Mia's instincts flared. She slipped into a nearby alley, watching the car from the shadows. A man in a dark coat emerged, scanning the area before speaking into a phone. Though she couldn't hear the words, his sharp gestures and tense posture spoke volumes. He was looking for someone. Mia's heart raced as she realized he might be looking for her. She pulled out her phone and texted Alexander, "Suspicious man near shelter. Black car. What do I do?" His reply was immediate, "Stay out of sight. I'm sending help. Don't engage." Mia huddled behind a dumpster, her breath shallow. Minutes felt like hours until she heard the faint sound of sirens. The man's head snapped up, and he quickly climbed back into the car, speeding off just as a police cruiser arrived. Mia stepped out of her hiding spot as an officer approached. "Are you Mia?" he asked. She nodded, her legs trembling. "Mr. Kane sent us," the officer explained. "Let's get you somewhere safe." Back at Kane Industries, Alexander met her with a relieved expression. "Are you okay?" I think so," Mia said, her voice shaking. "Who was that man? Why was he looking for me?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "Victoria's arrest rattled some powerful people. They're trying to intimidate anyone connected to the case, and you're a loose end. But I promise you, Mia, I won't let them hurt you." For the first time, Mia saw a vulnerability in Alexander. He wasn't just a powerful businessman, he was someone fighting battles she could barely comprehend. And now, she was part of those battles too. What happens now? She asked. Alexander's gaze hardened. Now, we fight back. Shadows in the dark. The night had never felt so heavy. Mia lay awake in her room at the shelter, her heart pounding from the events of the day. The memory of the black car, the mysterious man, and Alexander's grave warning looped endlessly in her mind. She'd thought her life on the streets had prepared her for anything, but this was a danger of an entirely different kind. No longer was it just about surviving hunger and cold, now, people were hunting her. She sat up, clutching the thin blanket around her shoulders. Her phone rested on the small nightstand, the message from Alexander still open, "Stay vigilant. We'll get through this." But how? Mia thought, staring at the glowing screen. Alexander had resources, power, and connections, but she was just a girl from the streets. What could she possibly do to protect herself? To fight back? The next morning, Mia was called into the shelter director's office. Ms. Carter, a kind but no-nonsense woman in her 50s, greeted her with a worried look. "Mia, we need to talk," Ms. Carter said, motioning for her to sit. "Mr. Kane contacted me last night. He's very concerned about your safety." Mia nodded, her hands gripping the armrests of the chair. I think someone was watching the shelter. A man in a black car. He was looking for me." Ms. Carter's brow furrowed. "The police reported the incident to me. They said you acted wisely by staying out of sight. But Mia, this is serious. Mr. Kane has offered to move you to a more secure location. He's even willing to provide private security if necessary." Mia's heart sank. Leaving the shelter felt like abandoning the fragile stability she'd started to build. The thought of private security following her everywhere made her uneasy. But staying might put everyone else in danger. "What do you think I should do?" Mia asked, her voice small. Ms. Carter leaned forward, her eyes soft with understanding. "I think you need to trust Mr. Kane. He's gone to great lengths to help you, and he seems genuinely invested in your safety. If he believes moving you is the best option, you should consider it." Mia nodded slowly. "Okay. I'll go." By evening, Mia was riding in a car driven by Henry. The city streets blurred past as they headed toward an unfamiliar part of town. When they arrived, Mia's jaw dropped. The building was a sleek, modern high-rise with mirrored windows that reflected the fading sunset. It looked more like a luxury hotel than an apartment complex. "This is, for me?" Mia asked, stepping out of the car. Henry smiled. "Mr. Kane insisted on the best. You'll have everything you need here." Inside, the apartment was even more stunning. The living room featured floor-to-ceiling windows, a plush sofa, and a kitchen stocked with enough food to last weeks. A small bedroom was tucked away to the side, its bed neatly made with crisp white linens. Mia turned to Henry, her voice trembling. "This is too much. I can't. I don't deserve this." Henry's expression softened. "Mia, you've been through more than most people can imagine. You deserve safety and comfort, and Mr. Kane wants to ensure you have it. Don't think of it as charity, think of it as a step toward a better future." She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Please tell him thank you. For everything." Over the next few days, Mia adjusted to her new surroundings. She spent her mornings reading and attending online GED classes, which Alexander had arranged for her. In the afternoons, she practiced cooking in the small but well-equipped kitchen. It was a far cry from her old life, and yet, the lingering fear of being watched never left her. One evening, as she sat by the window overlooking the city, her phone buzzed with a message from Alexander, "I'll be stopping by tomorrow to discuss something important. Be ready." Mia's stomach twisted with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. What could be so important that he'd come in person? The next day, Alexander arrived, his usual composed demeanor slightly frayed at the edges. He carried a folder in his hand, which he placed on the coffee table before sitting across from Mia. "I wanted to talk to you about Victoria Graves," he began. "The woman who tried to harm me." Mia leaned forward, her heart racing. "What about her?" Alexander opened the folder, revealing a series of photographs and documents. "Victoria's arrest has disrupted her network, but not completely. Some of her associates are still active, and they've been looking for ways to retaliate. The man you saw outside the shelter was likely one of them." Mia shivered. "Why would they care about me? I'm just nobody." "You're not nobody," Alexander said firmly. "You're a witness. And a symbol of their failure. Victoria's allies see you as a threat because you exposed her. That's why it's crucial we stay ahead of them." He paused, his expression softening. "Mia, I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you because I believe in your strength. You've already shown incredible courage, and I know you can handle this. But you need to trust me and follow my lead." Mia nodded, though her mind was spinning. "What do we do now?" "We start by identifying who's behind this," Alexander said, tapping the folder. "I've hired a private investigator to dig into Victoria's remaining network. In the meantime, I want you to stay here, focus on your studies, and let me handle the rest." Mia swallowed hard. "Okay. I'll do my best." That night, Mia couldn't sleep. She paced the apartment, her thoughts racing. The idea that she was being targeted felt surreal, like something out of a movie. But the fear was real. She decided she couldn't just sit back and wait for Alexander to solve everything. She needed to take action, to reclaim some sense of control over her life. Digging through the desk in her bedroom, she found a notebook and began writing down everything she could remember about the day she'd stopped Victoria. The details were fuzzy, but she hoped they might help. She also started researching Victoria Graves online, piecing together fragments of her life and career. What she discovered sent chills down her spine. Victoria wasn't just ambitious, she was ruthless. Articles detailed lawsuits, hostile takeovers, and allegations of bribery, all carefully buried under layers of public relations spin. The more Mia read, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about Alexander. Victoria and her allies were willing to destroy anyone who got in their way. As dawn broke, Mia sat by the window, her notebook filled with notes and questions. She didn't know how, but she was determined to help Alexander uncover the truth. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. And she wasn't going to back down. Into the fire. The next few days passed in a haze of tension and determination. Mia spent hours sifting through every scrap of information she could find about Victoria Graves and her network. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became that Victoria's web of influence extended far beyond Alexander Kane's business. This wasn't just a rivalry, it was a battle for control over industries that shaped the future. Mia's apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a strategic base. Her notebook overflowed with diagrams, timelines, and names she had linked to Victoria's operations. But the more she uncovered, the more dangerous her situation became. One evening, as she sat cross-legged on the floor, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen displayed Alexander's name. "Mia," he said, his voice unusually tense. "I've just received some disturbing news. Our investigator believes someone close to Victoria's organization has been asking questions about you. They're trying to figure out who you are and why you intervened that day." Mia's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means we're running out of time," Alexander replied. "We need to take the fight to them before they find a way to reach you. Are you willing to help me?" Mia hesitated. The idea of stepping deeper into this conflict terrified her, but she also knew she couldn't sit idly by. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady. The following day, Mia found herself in a private conference room at Kane Industries, sitting across from Alexander and his lead investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Evelyn Reyes. Evelyn had a commanding presence, her tailored suit and clipped tone exuding authority. She spread a series of photographs and documents across the table. "This," Evelyn began, pointing to an image of a middle-aged man with a stern expression, "is David Hargrove. He's one of Victoria's closest allies. We believe he's been coordinating efforts to locate and intimidate anyone connected to her arrest." Mia studied the photo, committing the man's face to memory. "What does he want from me?" "He wants to know what you saw and what you might say in court," Evelyn explained. "Victoria's case hinges on testimony from people like you. If they can discredit or silence you, they have a chance of dismantling the prosecution's case." Mia's fists clenched. "So what do we do?" Evelyn exchanged a glance with Alexander before answering. "We use you as bait." Mia's breath caught in her throat. "Bait?" "Not in a way that puts you at risk," Alexander said quickly. "Evelyn and her team will be monitoring everything. The goal is to draw out Hargrove or his associates and gather evidence we can use against them. But we can't force you into this, Mia. It's your choice." Mia looked between the two of them, her mind racing. She'd spent so much of her life feeling powerless, but now she had a chance to fight back. It terrified her, but it also ignited something deep within her, a determination to stand her ground. "I'll do it," she said firmly. The plan was set into motion that evening. Mia returned to her apartment, but this time, Evelyn's team had outfitted her space with surveillance equipment. Tiny cameras and microphones were hidden throughout the room, and a discreet panic button was placed on the nightstand. Evelyn briefed Mia on the steps to take if anything went wrong. "The moment you feel unsafe, press this button," she instructed. "We'll be nearby, ready to intervene." Mia nodded, her resolve firm. "I understand." Hours passed in tense silence as Mia waited. She sat by the window, pretending to read a book, while Evelyn's team monitored the feeds from a van parked down the street. The night dragged on, and just as Mia began to wonder if their plan had failed, a shadow moved outside her door. Her heart pounded as she heard a faint knock. Setting the book aside, she approached cautiously. "Who is it?" she called out. A muffled voice answered. "Delivery." Mia frowned. She hadn't ordered anything. She glanced at the surveillance camera mounted near the door, knowing Evelyn's team was watching. Summoning her courage, she unlocked the door and opened it slightly. Standing there was a man she didn't recognize, holding a plain brown package. His eyes darted nervously, and his posture was tense. "Who sent this?" Mia asked, keeping her voice steady. The man hesitated before replying, "Friend. They said it was important." Mia's instincts screamed that something was wrong. She stepped back, letting the door swing open wider. "You can leave it on the table," she said, motioning to the small table near the entryway. The man hesitated again, then stepped inside. As he placed the package on the table, Mia noticed a small bulge under his jacket, the unmistakable outline of a weapon. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Thank you," she said, stepping back toward the panic button. "That'll be all." The man didn't move. Instead, he straightened, his eyes narrowing. "You're Mia, right?" Before she could respond, the door burst open, and Evelyn's team swarmed in. The man barely had time to react before he was tackled to the ground, his weapon confiscated. Mia pressed herself against the wall, her breath coming in short gasps. "It's okay, Mia," Evelyn said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We've got him." Back at Kane Industries, Mia sat in a conference room with Alexander and Evelyn, still shaken but determined to see things through. The man had been identified as one of David Hargrove's operatives, and the package he delivered contained a listening device. "This confirms that Hargrove is actively targeting you," Evelyn said. But it also gives us leverage. With this evidence, we can tighten the noose around him and his associates. Alexander turned to Mia, his expression filled with pride. You were incredibly brave tonight, Mia. Because of you, we're one step closer to ending this. Mia managed a small smile. I want to help. I don't want anyone else to go through what I did. As the room fell silent, Mia realized how far she'd come. She was no longer just a girl surviving on the streets. She was part of something bigger, a fight for justice that mattered not just to her, but to countless others. And for the first time, she felt like she had the power to make a difference. Triumph in the shadows. Mia woke up the next morning with a newfound sense of determination. The events of the previous night played on a loop in her mind, the man at her door, Evelyn's team storming in, and the moment she realized just how far Victoria Graves' network was willing to go. But amidst the chaos, one thought stood out: she wasn't powerless anymore. She was part of a fight that mattered, and she wasn't going to back down. Over breakfast, Alexander called to check in on her. His voice, always calm and reassuring, carried an undertone of urgency. Evelyn's team uncovered something significant from last night, he said. They traced the operative's communications to a location just outside the city. We believe it's one of Hargrove's main safehouses. Mia's stomach tightened. What does that mean? It means we have an opportunity to strike, Alexander replied. But it also means we'll need your help again. Mia hesitated, her mind racing. The idea of stepping further into danger terrified her, but she knew this might be their only chance to end the threat once and for all. What do you need me to do? She asked, her voice steady. Later that day, Mia found herself in a secure briefing room at Kane Industries. Evelyn stood at the head of the table, a map projected behind her. Alexander sat beside Mia, his presence a steadying force as Evelyn laid out the plan. The safe house is located in an industrial complex on the outskirts of the city, Evelyn explained, pointing to a red dot on the map. We believe Hargrove and several of his associates are using it as a base to coordinate their operations. Our goal is to gather evidence that ties them to Victoria Graves and her network. Mia frowned. How do I fit into this? You'll be our eyes on the ground, Evelyn said. Your familiarity with staying unnoticed makes you the perfect candidate to scope out the area. We'll equip you with a concealed camera to capture any incriminating activity. You won't be alone, our team will be close by, ready to extract you if anything goes wrong. Mia's heart pounded, but she nodded. I can do it. The industrial complex loomed ahead, its rusted buildings and broken windows giving it an air of abandonment. But as Mia approached, she noticed subtle signs of activity, tire tracks in the dirt, faint voices echoing from one of the warehouses, and the glow of light seeping through cracks in the walls. She adjusted the small camera hidden in her jacket and glanced at the earpiece Evelyn had given her. I'm in position, she whispered. Copy that, Evelyn's voice replied. Proceed carefully. Mia slipped through a gap in the fence, her movements silent and deliberate. She kept to the shadows, her eyes darting between potential hiding spots. As she crept closer to the warehouse, she caught sight of two men standing by a side entrance. They were talking in low voices, their postures tense. Two guards at the side entrance, Mia murmured. Noted, Evelyn replied. Try to get closer and see if you can capture their conversation. Mia edged forward, her heart pounding with every step. She crouched behind a stack of crates, her camera angled toward the men. Their voices became clearer. Hargrove's furious, one of them said. He didn't expect Kane to fight back this hard. The other man snorted. What did he think would happen? The guy's a billionaire. He's got resources. Yeah, but this girl, the first man said, lowering his voice. She's the wild card. If we can't neutralize her, the whole plan falls apart. Mia's blood ran cold. They were talking about her. She pressed herself against the crates, willing herself to stay calm. "We'll deal with her soon enough," the second man said. "Hargrove's got a plan." "Let's hope it works," the first man replied. "Graves won't tolerate failure." Mia whispered into her earpiece. "They're talking about a plan to neutralize me." They mentioned Hargrove and Graves. "Understood," Evelyn said. "Fall back to the extraction point. We've got enough." Mia nodded and began to retreat, moving as quietly as she could. But as she turned a corner, she stumbled over a loose piece of metal. The clattering noise echoed through the air, and she froze. "Who's there?" one of the guards shouted. Mia's pulse spiked as she bolted, weaving through the maze of crates and machinery. She could hear the guards chasing after her, their footsteps growing louder. "Mia, head to the east gate." Evelyn's voice urged through the earpiece. She sprinted toward the gate, her lungs burning. As she rounded the corner, she spotted a black SUV waiting with its engine running. The back door swung open, and Evelyn's voice barked, "Get in." Mia dove into the vehicle just as the guards rounded the corner. The SUV peeled away, leaving them behind in a cloud of dust. Back at Kane Industries, Mia sat in the conference room, her hands trembling as she recounted the night's events. Alexander listened intently, his jaw tight with anger. "You were incredible out there," Evelyn said, her voice filled with admiration. "Thanks to you, we've got solid evidence linking Hargrove to Victoria Graves. This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for." Alexander leaned forward, his expression softening as he looked at Mia. "You've done more than anyone could have asked. I'm proud of you, Mia. And I promise, we'll make sure they can never hurt you again." Mia nodded, her fear gradually giving way to a sense of accomplishment. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had made a real difference. The girl who had once been invisible on the streets was now a force to be reckoned with. In the days that followed, the evidence Mia had gathered led to a series of arrests. Hargrove and several of his associates were taken into custody, and the authorities closed in on the remnants of Victoria Graves' network. Alexander ensured that Mia's role in the operation remained protected, shielding her from further danger. As she watched the news reports detailing the takedown, Mia felt a surge of pride. Her journey had been filled with pain and struggle, but it had also led her to this moment, a moment where she had proven her strength and courage. Alexander visited her apartment one last time before she moved to a new, undisclosed location to start the next chapter of her life. "You've come so far, Mia," he said, handing her a folder. Inside were documents for a scholarship he had arranged for her. "This is just the beginning. You have a bright future ahead of you." Tears filled Mia's eyes as she hugged him. "Thank you for believing in me," she whispered. Alexander smiled. "Thank you for reminding me what it means to fight for what matters." As Mia closed the door behind him, she looked out at the city skyline, a symbol of the challenges she had faced and the triumphs she had earned. She was no longer the invisible girl on the streets. She was Mia, a survivor, a fighter, and